Why you need to involve deaf and hard of hearing people in research and testing with Meryl Evans, CPACC. AliCamp 2022. AliCamp would like to thank our gold sponsors Intopia, Salesforce and Telstra, and silver sponsors ANZ, Deloitte Digital and Coles.
Howdy, I'm Mel, coming to you from up over in United States. My pronouns are she, her, and I am wearing a sweatshirt that says progress over perfection with the accessibility icon in yellow. I am a native Texan from Plano, which is right by Dallas. Yet that title in the image is made from a few decades ago, give or take, when I wore a vintage hearing aid on my chest and cord that connect my earpieces to the hearing aid. I was born hearing free, also known as profoundly deaf. To listen, I rely primarily on the breathing in my bionic ear, which done cooler than cochlear implant. This is my dad in the black and white photo from when he was a good humor man in Brooklyn, New York. He had 3 boys eagerly waiting for those treats. His first is on a curb cut. The initial purpose for it was to provide a ramp to allow wheelchairs to safely cross the street. The curb cut ended up helping a lot more people. Parents pushing strollers, people with shopping carts, travelers pulling luggage, and workers carrying heavy loads. When my kids were young, I sometimes encountered a step with no ramp. I'd have to turn the stroller around with my back to the street and carefully put the stroller down to stop to keep them safe. But it put me in a dangerous position in having my back to the street. I was grateful for every ramp. Thankfully, ramps aren't just found on street corners. You can find them at airports, grocery stores, office buildings, and many more places. Buildings with more than one floor added elevators to ensure people in wheelchairs could go wherever they needed to go. If there are stairs and elevators next to each other, which one will you take? But wait a minute. But if like ramps, elevators were built for wheelchairs, then why is everyone using elevators? Making your digital products accessible will have the curb cut effect. Captions are the best example of that. Many people think caption videos are for the deaf and hard of hearing. Yet, an Ofcom survey says 80% of those who use captions are not deaf or hard of hearing. We need to avoid making assumptions about disability, and here's why. Here's something that will surprise those of you who haven't met me. The most common assumption people make about me is that I know sign language. I don't. That's neither a good thing or a bad thing. So no right or wrong. It just is. Deaf and hard of hearing people are all different. I can only speak from my own experience. Even people in accessibility sometimes forget not to assume. An accessibility conference organizer said they will have an interpreter for me. Thank goodness they emailed before the conference. I would hate to show up and take the interpreter away from someone who needs them. I'm sorry the pandemic happened, of course, but it has made a huge difference for me. The pandemic drove companies to add caption to their video platform. Before the crisis, I had 0 meetings. I might have done 5 video calls in 15 years. Now, I'm shocked. My calendar didn't explode as I have more than 5 video meetings a week. But this doesn't mean it's been great for all deaf people. One man who identifies as hearing impaired says he hates video calls because the sound, the noise is magnified. Deafness is a spectrum. Some people sign, some don't. Some do both. Some relapse, some don't. Some wear hearing devices, some don't. The possibilities are endless. Deaf people don't fall into neat little buckets. We come in all sizes, shapes, and colors, just like these three buckets. I've met deaf and hard of hearing people where we both have the same preferences on something and where we don't on other things. While you can't begin to interview people covering every possibility, you want to get enough diversity in your user research, focus group, and user testing. Many of the things you do to ensure your product and content are accessible for the deaf will also benefit people with other disabilities and even no disability. That's the curb cut effect. We all know one of the most powerful and effective ways to ensure your digital content is accessible and inclusive is by involving people with disabilities throughout the entire product life cycle, from requirement and planning to implementation and continuous process improvement. However, one group is often overlooked, and that's the deaf and hard of hearing. Development teams think the deaf and hard of hearing can navigate websites and digital products with little trouble. They believe all we need are captions and transcripts for any audio and video. Thus, web developers and QA do their own testing with caption and transcript. They figure turning off the sound is enough to mimic our experience. It's not. And besides, there's more to testing captions than checking accuracy. We'll dig into that shortly. Meanwhile, some people shared an article talking about a visual way to experience a podcast that's accessible to the deaf and hard of hearing. They described it as gorgeous. Unfortunately, it was the opposite of gorgeous to me and many others. First, I am grateful for experiments like that. I feared speaking my truth about what I really thought of that visual podcast. Why? Because I don't want to come across as trampling on a company's effort to try to help people with disabilities. But then, if I don't speak up, how would companies learn to iterate? I'm going to share a screenshot from the podcast. It doesn't begin to capture the experience, but the font and the color will say a lot. Here's a trigger warning because the background of the image is yellow. So I'll share my thoughts on this visual podcast. For one thing, deaf people have a high rate of vestibular disorder. One study has found 70% of deaf and hard of hearing children with nerve deafness have a vestibular disorder. The yellow colors and motion on the webpage instantly triggered mine. I could barely tolerate the experience. Nonetheless, I kept scrolling to see what would happen while cringing. Moreover, knowledge population-based studies have found that every year, 15 to 20% of adults experience dizziness, according to a study on PubMed called The Epidemiology of Dizziness and Vertigo. I haven't even touched on data for people with migraine, epilepsy, or autism spectrum disorder. They're all affected by color and motion with the slow fade in, fade out imagery, font style, and colors. The font I'll show here is the serif font. When it comes to online content, serif fonts are not as readable as thin serif fonts. And here's the kicker that surprised me. The article said the visual podcast was tested with a focus group of deaf and hard of hearing people, led by an accessibility activist. This had me scratching my head. Aside from all this, some deaf and hard of hearing people have other disabilities, and this podcast isn't accessible to keyboard-only navigation. You can only scroll with the mouse. When you hit a tab key, it moves on to the next podcast. Many people have similar comments about the visual podcast. Some of them couldn't tolerate it and had to close the page. I know I'm not an exception. I don't have the unusual combination of disability. Deaf people have been telling me they've had vertigo all their lives. So the reason reduced motion and dark mode are options. So this is progress over perfection. Someone decided to try a visual podcast with the deaf and hard of hearing. I told the creators I loved the initiative and encouraged them to keep experimenting, keep iterating, keep getting feedback. Speaking of motion, let's get rid of this yellow slide and move on to the next one. No audio or video should ever play automatically. Many people don't like it, and multiple studies support it. If you ever come across a video player with no controls, it's frustrating because it may be loud or you simply want to stop it. Every time this happens, I close the page or the player. So always have player control, including play, stop, rewind, forward, volume, and subtitle. If someone wants to back up and rewatch something, you want to make that possible. It keeps them on your content longer. Have you ever landed on a page where there's a slider? It moves at its own pace. You can't stop it or slow it down. What about a page with a huge video showing a theme that is thickening for people sensitive to motion? As I mentioned before, motion is a trigger for many conditions. Here's something a lot of deaf users and testers will notice. When I talked about it, it blew the mind of many accessibility pros who had no idea about this. We need to change the process for forums to make them more inclusive. There's a field on online forum that frustrates a lot of deaf and hard of hearing folks. Care to guess which one? The phone number field. And it's often a required field. You can't add any information except the phone number. I read a deaf person's story about applying for jobs and needing to fill that field. He said he didn't have a phone number. He's already frustrated with the job hunting process. This makes it worse. There are ways deaf people can get a free phone number. Still, the onus should not be on the person filling the form. We need a second box or option for text only. I have a cell phone and give my phone number to close friends and family. They know to use it for texting, not calling. No matter how many times I explain this to some people, they'll call me. I know companies need to make contact options required to ensure they can reach that person, but there's a better and more inclusive way to do that. Give people at least 2 communication options. Make it required to choose one of the options. There's a screenshot of an actual form that asks how people want to be contacted It's a required field and it gives 3 options. Email me, text me, call me, automated. Here's a quick little story. I was watching a show and the subtitles were bad on TV. I tried on demand and they were bad there too. Next, I tried the network app. Same thing. So I searched the network's website for contact and found one. Get there. My choices were snail mail, a fax number, and a phone number. Who uses snail mail or a fax these days? The only real option was the phone number, but that's out for me and many others who are not deaf. So, whenever offering communication options, ensure you provide 2 modern options for everything, including communications with customers, coworkers, and vendors. You can provide a chat box, an email address, an online form that's accessible, a video call with caption or sign language, or a phone number with call or text as an option. This applies to in-person conversation. We often default to one method of communication, talking or a phone call. Why can't we have a conversation by text message, even if we're sitting next to each other? I once had an entire conversation using pen and paper. Be thoughtful before asking someone, let's get on a phone call, or sending them a voice message on social media. Always offer choices. Digital products and websites don't exist in silos. They're part of the company's processes that also include real-world scenarios. Once I joined an online chat with tech support, the first thing they asked for was a callback number in case we got disconnected. I submitted a suggestion to the company to add email as an option. The next time I contacted them, they asked me for a phone number or an email if we got disconnected. The digital process may work perfectly fine for a sighted, deaf, or hard of hearing customer, but there could be a problem with other parts of the process, like the time I had to go through drive-through testing for COVID. That was a bad experience. I could not communicate with the person at the window. I could not see them because of the reflection on the glass. They talked to me through a speaker while wearing a mask. Another customer wanted to go through the drive-through, and the pharmacy told her she had to come inside. Well, she had a mobility disability and went elsewhere for drive-through testing. This same process failed a blind person because he couldn't sign up for testing online without someone's help. One process put up 3 barriers for 3 people with 3 different disabilities. Hence, we need to think about 360-degree accessibility, which is both the digital and non-digital processes. It involves looking at the text, the role, and finally, the environment. Is the task done online, offline, both? Did your organization think about all these interactions? I'd love to tell us to turn on the notification. Anything to keep us using the app as much as possible, right? A lot of them use sound or beep to notify us there's an update, a change in status, or a new message. Just like with contact options, provide at least 2 notification options. It helps to have at least 2 non-sound notification options. Non-sound alert could be a pop-up, a badge, text that stands out, or haptics. For important alerts, I use vibration on my phone and my watch. For less important notification, I use badges or text pop-ups. Devices offer many notification options. Some people prefer vibration over visual alert, while others prefer visual alert over vibration. Or they may have different preferences depending on the type of alert. Developers and QA can test for these by turning off the sound. You know where to look. Deaf and hard of hearing users, on the other hand, won't expect it. And they're the best ones to tell you if they know how to set the alerts they want and notice them. Of course, sound is fine too, as some people prefer that. Providing a lot of options makes the difference, as it allows everyone to customize the product based on their preferences. That's the value of universal design, which is design that's usable to the greatest extent possible by everyone, regardless of age, size, ability, or disability. Enough haptics, those are the little vibrations that stimulate touch that you typically find on a smartphone. Anyway, I have a watch that works with my phone. Without looking at my watch, I can tell you if I got a text message, alert, or someone is at the door. That's because each one has different vibration patterns, just like people choose different sounds for phone alerts. One day, someone posted about a product with a deaf and hard of hearing. It's a wristband. That's all it is. It has no screen, just light and control. What it does is alert the wearer to the different sounds, such as water running, baby crying, doorbell ringing, and more. In response to that post, a deaf person claimed he spoke for all deaf people when he says, "We don't like haptics." That's not true. I love haptics, and others chimed in agreeing with me. Imagine if you had done user research with that one person and you decided not to add haptics to a product. That's why it's so important to talk to multiple people with a similar disability. Next up is inclusive video meetings. The reason we're covering that is because we often have video meetings to communicate with users, testers, focus groups, customers, and our own calling. Everyone's input is valuable. Before the pandemic, most video conferencing platforms did not have captions. It was yet another communication tool that made me feel knocked out. A few months after the pandemic, most video platforms added automatic captions. That's when everything changed in my personal life and career. Captions helped me feel more included. Although my youngest attended his last year of high school on the second floor of our home/office/school building, he did a lot of video calls and he seen me on captioned video calls. Then he went off to university. I worried I would never hear from him again until he came home, except for questions about laundry. Then I got an amazing text message from him. He asked if I'd like to get on a captioned video call. The pandemic normalized captioned video calls for him and many others. Despite the challenges of the pandemic, it did a lot of great things for people with disabilities, like make captioned video calls widely available, online meetings more accessible than in-person meetings, and virtual conferences more durable than face-to-face events. For me, captioned video calls provide the best experience for live conversation, but that isn't true for all deaf or hard of hearing people. So many people benefit from subtitles. Always have them turned on. Remember, everyone needs accessibility, not just your clients and customers, but also your own employees, vendors, and users in your research and testing. Here's a quick review of how to ensure your online meetings are inclusive, especially when working with users and customers. Some deaf people complained about the placement of captions because they couldn't look directly at the camera. But even with caption on top, I'm still not quite looking at the camera. Besides, I cannot read that very well when the captions are on top. A better solution is to allow people to move the caption. Several platforms do that. These are things people depend on captions when noticed. Developers, testers, and user researchers won't think about these things. There's a trend encouraging camera off meetings. When you do that, you take away from people who depend on visual cues and reading lips. However, if someone gets anxiety, moves around a lot, or can't position their face on video, then it's fine to leave the camera off. I don't want anyone miserable on my account. Just beware, the automatic captions may not capture what a person says correctly. Use the chat box to clarify. Hence, it's important to offer multiple ways to communicate on video call. Here are the other things that will help ensure your video meetings are accessible for everyone, not just the deaf and hard of hearing. There's the curb cut effect again, y'all. You want to provide both caption and an accessible transcript. That's your string text. Transcripts are not a substitute for caption. You need both. You also want to ensure the platform you use to communicate with the user is accessible. Most user experience researchers and those working with focus groups tend to send out a questionnaire to potential participants. This is your opportunity. On that forum, ask what accommodations they would like. As for processes, open every meeting with a quick reminder to say your name whenever you speak. Avoid having two people speak at the same time. Don't talk fast. These tips help caption sign language interpreters and those who don't see the video. And make sure your face shows in the middle of the screen rather than at the bottom where the captions tend to be. Why is there a photo of me with my eyes wide open pointing to my shirt that says accessibility is not official? Because some companies charge extra for captions. No one should have to pay for accessibility. As mentioned before, turning off the sound to check the captions will not reflect the lived experience of someone who is deaf, hard of hearing, or depends on subtitles. We watch hours and hours of subtitles. We will notice things that testers checking the subtitles won't notice. The number one rule of high quality caption is readability. When no one can read the caption, none of the other rules matter. While testers can check for synchronization between sound and caption, sometimes their hearing will fill in the gaps, and they don't realize there are synchronization problems that deaf people will notice. Yes, we can tell when the subtitles are out of sync without any sound. The subtitles may not match the action on the screen or lip movement. We also notice problems with long subtitles and bad breaking point or line division. This is the last word of the caption line. When not done right, it can cause cognitive overload and confusion. Hearing people won't notice missing sounds in captions. They're used to hearing it, as they don't realize the important role of sound. This is something they can't test with the sound off. Hearing people can identify a speaker as they can hear the person's voice and recognize the speaker. That's not the case with the deaf and hard of hearing. I was watching this thing. I replayed it and replayed it. I couldn't figure it out. Who was saying a specific line? Speaker identification matters. As I mentioned before, caption videos aren't the only thing deaf and hard of hearing people need. Transcripts of videos and podcasts are also important. Whenever possible, you want to offer both captions and transcripts. Some people prefer captions, some prefer transcripts, and transcripts are often accessible too, refreshable, braille displays, and screen readers. These don't work with captions. Net captions need to be readable, so do transcripts. They often contain large blocks of text with very few paragraph breaks, if any. This is not scannable. This is not readable. It causes cognitive overload. As I mentioned before, deafness is a spectrum. When you've met one deaf person, then you met one deaf person. We're all different. When a company interviews only one deaf person, then its product will most likely fail. Remember how one deaf person said he spoke for all of us when he said we don't like haptics? This doesn't mean you have to interview many deaf people to cover the spectrum. Ensure you have a variety when interviewing 5 or 6 users. It's time for companies to start including the deaf and hard of hearing customers in their product development. The best way to ensure your content is accessible is by involving people with disabilities early in the design before you create anything. That's what shift left means, moving accessibility early in the product development process and involve people with disabilities through the entire process. I'm still perplexed how that visual podcast went live at the did. As my shirt in the picture says, progress over perfection. The trick is to get started. Don't wait until you've created a minimal, valuable product. It's faster and cheaper to do it right the first time than to retrofit accessibility. Accessibility that's baked in the entire process is far cheaper than retrofitting. My son and his friends made cupcakes and tasted them. They were awful. They forgot a very small ingredient, just 1 teaspoon of salt. Sprinkling it all over the cupcakes will not fix it. The only way to fix it is to start over. You may have heard the phrase, nothing about us without us. But I encourage you to take it a step further and make it like my shirt says in the photo, nothing without us, by hiring people with disabilities. Thank you.
AliCamp 2022.